What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I apologize. You can probably hear my air conditioner running. We still don't have the AC repaired at my house, but we bought a little room unit to try to at least keep it, below 100 degrees in here. It's definitely fighting out of its weight class, but it's it's doing the best it can. So anyway, I didn't want to continue to wait. I wanted to do something at least. So the idea I had was to focus in on doing some interesting things with reflective surfaces. I've touched on reflective surfaces in some other tutorials, but it was just something that I didn't really know how to do. So I'm just going to talk about. I'm not going to get into like ray marching theory or any of that. That's a little above my pay grade at the moment. But there are some pretty simple ways to do it with PBR textures. And then there's a thing that I like to do after we've rendered a reflective surface that gives it a pretty interesting look, in my opinion. So anyway, let's get started. We're actually going to bring in a mesh. This always takes me forever to find. I need to move it somewhere. So I'm just looking for, it's a basic mesh of, it's supposed to just be a kind of simple polygonal female face. But I'm not sure where I stored it, so give me just a second to find it here. Okay, so there's our mesh. So now what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and set up a render network. Cool. So we get a light, camera, and a geo component, and then I'm going to add a render top. I'm going to change my resolution just because I'm always doing Instagram stuff, so I'm just going to do their res, which is 1080 by 1920. Feel free to put this at whatever you want. I'll change it back to something that'll work on the non-commercial version. Okay, so this is pretty small, so let's go ahead and we can either make it bigger or move the camera in. For now, I'm just going to move the camera in a bit. Too far. Yeah, that's fine. Alright, and then let's connect that to an RGB key, so we have a black background. And let's connect that to a null, and turn the background 0. Alright, so there's our mesh, just sitting there doing nothing, looking, still kind of cool, but not what we're here for. So actually I do want to move this in a bit more. Alright, there we go, that's nice. Okay, so one little housekeeping thing we're going to have to do. Actually, no, I don't think we do. No, I'm sorry. I was going to add an attribute create to get tangents, but since we're not actually going to do any displacement to the surface, I won't need that. So never mind. Forget I said anything. All right, what are we doing? So we also need. So the way we're going to do the reflective surface is with an environment light, and then we are going to. Add in a material. We're going to add a PBR material. We're going to drag that onto our geo, select our material, and there we go. All right, now nothing's happening. We just turned gray because that's our base color. Because we haven't given our environment light an environment map. So let's give it something to look at. Now this can be anything, but there's a few things to think about when you're making a reflective surface. A reflective surface, typically, you know that it's reflective because it is showing you a mirrored but distorted version of the world around it. So if there is no world around it, if there's nothing that exists, that is reflecting onto the surface, then there's nothing for it to reflect back. So something has to exist outside, and I think in order to get the most convincing looking reflective surfaces, mirrored chrome type looks, we need to use something that's designed to be a sphere map. So we need to use an EXR or an HDRI file, which you can, there are tons of them just available online. Let's see, I think you can get a bunch at Polyhaven. HDRIs are available at Polyhaven, so if you want to get something that'll be good for this, you can just go here, and these are all free to download. This one looks pretty cool. I haven't seen this one yet, so I'm going to grab this. Just package. Okay, see what that comes with. So let's go ahead and come back into Touchdesigner, and then we can pull that in with just the movie file in, and then let's attach that to a null because we may want to put some stuff in here and do something to just the raw video. Okay, so this is going to be our environment map, so we can go ahead and drag our null onto our environment light and select environment map. Right now it's banana, so we get the vaguely yellow thing here, but when we select that HDRI I just downloaded, that I don't see. Oh, there we go. Alright, so if we open that, cool. Alright, now something's happening. So, what is going on with that? Let's. I wonder. Images sRGB. I don't think it is. No, it's not. I don't know why the color is so jacked up. Maybe I need to change my pixel input. That didn't do a damn thing. Alright, well, we'll use input. This is what I was saying, we might want to put something in here, so I'm not sure why it's doing that, but I'm going to throw a level top in there and see if we can fix this. If I bring my gamma up a bit. Yeah, that looks better. Hold up right, it's just the hair. The lights are overblown. Alright, that's pretty good. Okay, so we have our environment, we have our environment map. This is already tracking onto there, but as you can see, this is not. It's just sort of changed color. It's not reflective. So the easiest way to do this is to just come into PBR and take the roughness all the way down to 0. And there you go. We now have a nice reflective texture, and it responds to as this thing moves. So if I just learned this trick recently, by the way. I'm not totally sure how or why this works, but rather than setting up an LFO or anything to animate your camera movement, you can come into the pre-X form, turn it on, go to the rotate setting, and then in the Y-axis put in, just do the abs time function. Abs time dot seconds. And then I don't know how. It's probably kind of slow. Yeah, it's very slow. So if I multiply that by, I don't know, 10. There we go. Now you can see each of those surfaces is reflecting our PBR texture, and it is it's changing depending on what face is hitting the surface. So that's really all. Let me zoom in a little so you can see. But this is really all that's required to get a good looking reflective texture. And as you can see, it's not particularly taxing on the CPU or GPU, but it looks really good. Now there's some stuff that you can do to this, I think, to make it look a little better. It just sort of depends on what you want. If you want something that looks really, really chromed like that, then you can leave it. If you want something that's going to be, a little bit less mirrored and just sort of kind of a brushed metal look, you can mess with the roughness settings. You still get, all that color from the environment, but you're not seeing as much detail. You can do that up to, a certain extent until you stop seeing it. So depending on what you're going for, this can be a cool look. You can also, you can mess with your environment map. Since it's in tops, you have any option you can think of. You could throw a wild feedback loop in here if you were so inclined, or just something simple like a blur. So now you can see it's reflecting, but it's not sharp. So that would be like if we this would be more realistic with a shorter lens on a camera if we were focused on this, but had a narrower depth of field. So what's being reflected is the reflectivity is preserved, but the detail is less sharp because of the depth of field. Of course, we can mess with that blur setting however we want. That's pretty nice. Okay, so that's, you can do whatever you want in here, and I would be willing to bet that you can probably get some really wild stuff with a feedback loop thrown in here, and before we call it a night, I might even do that. I don't have much planned beyond what's next. So there is a bloom tool that I really like. I got it from TDSW, who also has a Patreon. But I'm not sure if that's their proprietary tool or what, so I'm not going to use it, but I am going to kind of mimic the look of it just using Touchdesigner's bloom from the palette menu. So I just dragged bloom out here. Let me connect that up. Okay, so that is not doing anything for me. So first thing I do on this to get the simpler kind of just straight up glow look that I want is I pull the ramp level all the way down. If you look at the ramp, it has kind of an RGB and black. I wonder if the alpha's down on that. Yeah, okay, so it says just red, green, blue, and transparent in this ramp. So it's sort of a secondary glow setting. As you can see, it gets more colorful, and you can kind of see those chromatic aberrations around the edge. So the other thing that you can do, which is interesting, is you can pipe the texture into the second input, and that becomes sort of the color calculus, if you will, for what the ramp is composed of. So and that can get kind of interesting. You can make it, kind of glitch out by giving it itself as ramp glow input, and then you get some very interesting artifacts. You can see these kind of rings start popping up. I do that on a fair amount of stuff, but anyway, we're going for a simple glow. So let me get back to that. So if I pull the ramp level all the way down, it's the first thing. Then I turn my glow color to white. I'm going to bring the threshold all the way down. I want the glow on everything. And if I add a background into this, the glow will be on that too, which does kind of help with the realism. I feel like having things too sharp can be kind of a giveaway or I don't know, makes it less convincing for some reason. I guarantee not everyone will agree with that, but that's just sort of my thing. Anyway, so we have that. I'm gonna pull down the number of iterations. What this does is it sort of adds shape to the glow. So it's like the less blur size and the fewer I guess fewer times they run the glow operation. I think it's just a gentle feedback probably that they're doing. But the number of times that runs, it just adds a little more shape the lower you get with that. So there's that. And the other thing I want to do is pull the intensity down a little bit. I don't really want it to glow all the time. I just kind of want it to blow out, the really like high highlights, just a little bit. So there we go. Now we have kind of a nice subtle halation effect from the bloom. The other bloom, it's basically what this does. It really only has white glow. You can mess with the. Actually, I'm gonna bring this up. Anyway, yeah, and then rather than having a blur size and iterations, it just has a shape control, and then it's always on, so there is no threshold control. So this is sort of mimicking their tool, and I just happen to like this look a lot. Okay, so one other thing we could do, if we wanted to make it look like it's reflecting this background, and we can actually see the room around it, we can do that too. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a sphere to map this onto. So let me go ahead and find a sphere. There we go. Didn't really organize my render network. Let's move that over there, and then let's put that into a geo. All right, there it is. And we got lucky on this one. This particular mesh it's very small, so I didn't have to resize my sphere. It's just radius 1 in every direction. I guess if it wasn't in every direction, it wouldn't be a sphere, but what are you gonna do? Anyway, it managed to fit the head well inside it, and the camera's close enough that it's not bumping into it either. So that's good. That's what we need. Okay, so what we need to do here is we need to add a texture to this, and we're going to use something similar to this here, but not exactly the same. So I'm going to drag this down. I'm going to put another level, because we're probably going to have to do the same thing on this, but we'll see in a second. Then I'm going to add a null, and then I'm going to add another texture here. This time I'm going to use for the sake of getting into some abstraction, I'm going to use a Fong. You could also use a constant. That would be fine. It'll accomplish essentially the same thing. But I'm going to drag my Fong onto this. The Fong just gives me some options for like messing with the actual shape of the sphere mesh. I can displace the vertices based on some pieces of this texture if I'm so inclined. I'm not going to do that now, but I like to have the option. So I'm going to drag my null, that new null, onto the Fong and select Parm Color Map. Okay. Cool. So there we go. So now we have we do have kind of an issue, because as you can see, when it gets kind of past this profile view here, it just goes black. So that is because our light here is not shining in that direction. It's only shining this way. So I'm going to try a couple things. I think if I just set this to the same pre-X form as my camera rotation, that it should rotate with the camera and therefore be shining both on our mesh and on our sphere behind it the whole time, so it should keep the surface evenly illuminated. I think it was times 10, so let's Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we're getting essentially the same, it's functioning the same way as if we had set up a look at camera. If we dragged a null into the look at parameter here and told the camera to always point at the origin, we'd be getting the same thing. It's kind of a handy little method to get the same thing, just putting a Python function in there. Yeah. Anyway, so now we can see, now we have the room, but it looks a little weird because this is reflecting the room, but it's blurry, but the room isn't. So there's some stuff about this I don't like. I don't mind that the room is kind of dark. That sort of makes sense. But I think I need to adjust some things here. So maybe let's make the room a little darker. A little brightness down on this level. Because the lights need to look sort of like lights. What if I also make this the emit map? Brightness back up to closer to 1. That's good. So, okay, so what that did, I think it just makes the white values and black values map whether our Phong is emitting light or not. So that's cool if you have a texture that needs to have kind of different alpha values happening here. So I'm going to add a blur into the room too, just because it's too sharp and it doesn't actually make sense to have the room be so sharp and the figure be so dull. Okay, so this is more like the level of abstraction that I'm kind of used to with Touchdesigner. So now this looks good. This looks to me pretty compelling. And I'm not sure I'd call it convincing necessarily, but I like the look. So okay, so anyway, so there's how to do it. And you of course can do this same thing with any mesh. You just may need to resize your network and reposition your camera and so forth. But yeah, that's how to do it. Now the other thing that I was talking about that I like to do once you have a good reflective surface set up is to add an edge top into this post render. And I like to do it before the bloom because I think it creates some interesting artifacts. So I like to push the strength a lot when I do this, just because it brings out some strange artifacts, especially in dark places like in the background there. So I'm actually going to push this beyond 10. And just keep going until I like it. Trouble is if you go too far, it starts to get really grainy. So I'm going to pull that down, and I'm gonna I think reduce the blur on the background a little bit. So yeah, let's put that at like 13. Let's pull this blur down a little. Yeah, okay. So now we got some cool stuff happening. So now that we've entered the world of abstraction rather than realism, you can do anything you want with this. So this is kind of where adding feedback loops into our texture here might get fun. And this is also why I had a Phong here. So if we if we add something to give displacement and texture values to a Phong, then we can make our sphere start doing some weird shit. So let's add where'd it go? Normal map. We need a normal map. So let's add a normal map. And then let's go ahead and let's go ahead and just duplicate all of this, and this is going to be our height map. Only reason I did that is just because I want to be able to have some separate controls on the blur and the level of our height map. see what I'm talking about in a second here. Alright, so we have these organized a little weirdly, but whatever. Alright, so we need to add these to our FOM, give it more information to work with. So I'm going to take the normal map, and I'm going to drag it up to the normal map input there. Okay, then I'm going to take our height map, which is null 4 here. I guess if I were... actually, nah, fuck it. We can figure it out. Null 4 is our height map. So I'm going to drag that onto the FOM, and then... shit, no, we need to do something else first. I need to enable the height map, and then I need to drag it on. Okay, so I can just drag it there. That's fine. That works too. Okay, so now we have an actually physically textured sphere in the background based on our input here, and we can mess with that to our heart's content. If I want to displace vertices on our sphere, it jacks up the geometry based on I think the RGB level of the texture. So some pretty interesting things going on there. You can see it really starts to warp in some interesting ways. And it doesn't have to be that extreme. You can make it much more subtle. You can animate this feature. That might be pretty cool. You can mess with parallax occlusion. You can mess with your parallax scale. Okay. Again, you can animate these kinds of things as well. You can mess with your bump scale on your normal map. That creates a pretty cool halo out of the ceiling up there. So I like that. So what else could we do here? I kind of want to get weird. So I think I've got. Don't know what's going to become of these, but we'll see. I actually want to see what happens when I adjust the blur on the height map. So no blur, it's doing some weirdness, a lot of blur, alright, so mid-range blur looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to add feedback loop in here. Space these out. So, fill room. Let's grab these, move these down. Alright. Let's do some feedbacking. That composite. I don't remember how long it took me to memorize what the feedback loop structure was, but I feel like it was embarrassingly long. I had to keep looking back. Alright, so there we go. It's on multiply, so the whole thing just disappeared. Let's add a pulse so we can pulse our feedback. Shoot. Not like that. How did the pulse do that? Okay, great. So then, so if I turn this into something that will... Alright, cool. So feedback loop isn't doing anything, so nothing's happening. Let's add some things. Just go... I guess level. Yep, first sign of frame rate droppage. Alright, so we're starting to get a little bit of artifacts when I turn the opacity down on this level. So let's throw something a little more extreme in there. Let's put a displace. And then let's just displace it by itself. Displace it by itself, and let's pull that displace weight down a good bit. Not all the way, but pull it to 0 and then pull it back up a little. Okay, so some things are happening. So let's add a noise into the situation. I'm going to drag this, yeah, so I'm just going to add that into the display slope. So we've got a noise, I'm going to drag the level into the input so we get the correct resolution, and then I drag that into the bottom of the displace. I need to change output to just be noise, and then I need to animate it. I also need to make it non-monochrome. Okay, cool. Now I can do the typical noise animation, going to transform, going to the z-axis of translate, and putting in abs time.seconds. And let's do times 0.3. Alright, there we go. Now we got some boogieing noise displacement happening in the background. So, okay, it's kind of interesting. What else can we do here? I feel like the noise is not really, it's just not doing anything for me. There we go. Now that's more interesting. Okay, cool. So I just pulled the period down so the noise is much smaller, so it's wiggling around a lot more. It's pretty cool. I kind of want to see what it looks like. Right now, if you remember, I have my the environment map is on a different it's on a different thread here than this one. So I kind of want to see what it looks like if I pull this onto the environment map, so that the changes in the face are reflected. Is that going to just tank my frame rate? Oh, it is. That's too bad. Alright, well, I mean, this isn't necessarily the end of the world. Like, this would probably still be pretty cool rendered. I'm not going to take time to do that right now, but just drag this back. Oh, sorry about the frame rate. There we go. Alright, now we're back to something usable. Alright, what is this telling me? Oh yeah, okay, that was that attribute create thing. So the SOP is normal mapping, but it doesn't have tangents, so we need to give it tangents. We can do that with an attribute create, and just turn on tangents, and no more warning. Yay! What else do I want to do here before calling it a day? So some stuff I don't really care for, I'm seeing around the edges here. So I'm gonna, I need to actually, let's change the render pixel format to be greater bit depth, and then let's go to render, and let's up the anti-aliasing basically as high as your computer can handle, and then we get a little bit of improvement, but it's still there. It's just sort of, the edge top is kind of indiscriminate about accentuating digital artifacts like that. So we can add a blur in front of it, and just do a very, very gentle, yeah. And then then we lose a lot of those really hard edges on some of those artifacts. It's still there on some of them. Maybe, maybe 2 is too low. Maybe if we go back up to 3. Yeah, that gets most of them. We could also do the old Electronaut trick of adding a Luma blur most of the artifacts I'm seeing are up in the top, so I'm going to make this vertical. And then I don't want the whole thing, so I need to kind of move. I need to add another dark stop in here, so I have less of a white ramp. That's probably pretty good. And then if I go to my Luma blur, I can adjust the white filter width to be pretty significant. This could be a cool thing to animate as audio reactivity now that I'm looking at it, especially when you have edges in there. That could be fun. But you can adjust the filter width on your ramp to get some interesting things. It's kind of blurring more of the head than I would like. So maybe if I move my camera up slightly. Yeah, that did it. Now we can see the details on the face, but we get kind of an interesting graininess or blurriness from our tilt shift. We could also switch this, if we don't care too much about what's happening on top, we could pump the black filter and pull the white filter down, and then adjust the ramp to look a little more the way it's supposed to. Like that. So that's kind of fun, and that just sort of mimics if we have a ramp with dark at both ends, white in the middle, sort of mimics just a short lens, something narrow depth of field. Okay, so there's some stuff you can do, and then of course you can kind of come back and look at what's happening if you turn off some of this post-render stuff. It definitely gets weird. Yeah, but just sort of depends on what you're going for. If you don't want all that, you can just bypass. You can bypass the feedback loop by just cutting out the comp like that, and then we're back. It still looks weird because it still is using normal mapping and so forth. But if I can turn a lot of that off pretty easily. Pull my bump scale down, and then we should have kind of a smooth surface. Anyway, there you go. You can get wild with this. I do this with, I like to do this with particles. I just like the way they look when they have a reflective surface, whether I actually pipe in the background to make it look like it's in that environment or not. It just kind of depends on, where the night takes me. So there's some looks, but again, I really like making a reflective surface and then throwing the edge top on it. And then, once that happens, you can get away with a lot more weirdness, I think. So there you go. There is my reflective surfaces technique, and there's a thing. Yeah. What else should I touch on here? This is like a completely different technique. Nope, I think that's it. Alright, cool. Well, see you at the next one. Hope you enjoy.